Up next on the TWIP Network, Gordon Lang and I have a very special edition. We're going to talk about travel gear, not just cameras, not just lenses, but all the little goodies you might want to take on a trip on All About the Gear. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be where you are. This is Doug Kay, and I'm here with my friend, not Gordon England, but Gordon Lang from England, Brighton, England, in fact, with a looks like a Keith Haring mug.
It is a Keith Haring mug.
Oh, very good.
I'm glad you noticed. It's a fabulous mug. I bought it in New York a long time ago. There was a Keith Haring shop there. It's not there anymore.
Is there? Well,
yeah, I don't think it's there anymore.
Keith Haring was very big in San Francisco when he was alive. There are a number of Keith Haring sculptures. You know, I failed to comment for those who are watching the video. It seems like every week you have an interesting mug for us.
Yes, I thought I'd mix it up a bit. Normally it's the same one. It's actually a San Francisco mug.
The San Francisco mug. In my honor, is that what that is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So your honor is depleted now, so I've gone for something different.
Oh, very good. All right, Gordon, listen, we're going to do a very special show today. We're not going to review a camera. We're not even going to review a particular lens. We're going to talk about gear for travel. And we're going to stick to gear. We could have all sorts of topics about travel. We could talk about philosophies of where to go, how to go, who to go with. But this is all about the gear, so we're going to talk all about the gear. And before we start, I want to make one pitch for myself. I've just set the dates for my next Cuba workshops, one in November, one in January, and one in March. And if you go to dougk.com, you can check out all the details about my Cuba workshops for those 2 or 3 people who have yet to go to Cuba.
I've not been to Cuba, Doug.
Well, you should come join one of my workshops. I'd love to. Okay, so we're going to get through a lot of gear. The first thing, just because we're so used to doing cameras, Gordon, when you travel, what kinds of camera gear in general do you take with you? And I should say, you've just come back from a family vacation in Europe. I'm about to leave in 4 days for a trip to France, Italy, and Spain myself. It's a family vacation, not a photo trip per se. And I think that's what qualifies as travel, let's say, as opposed to street or landscape or something. So generally, what camera gear do you take with you?
Well, I should probably first of all say that almost all of my trips are the same. I go away with the same people, which is generally my family. We travel together and I shoot all the time. So they're all photo trips. And I, as a consequence, always take pretty much the same gear. There are a couple of exceptions if there's a special event that I'm covering. For example, if I'm away over summer, I know I'll be shooting some of the cycling at the Tour de France, so I'll generally take a bigger telephoto lens and a camera that I know is good for action. But my general kind of go-to kit that I take away, I always take away one interchangeable lens camera. For the past 6 years or so, that interchangeable lens camera has been a mirrorless camera, and I normally switch between, depending on how the mood takes me, my Olympus OMD EM1. These are actually my cameras. Now, as part of my job at Camera Labs, I get loaned cameras, I test them, and then they get returned to the manufacturer. But these are actually my own ones that I use for my personal work. So I've got an OMD EM1, which is a fantastic all-round general-purpose camera. And I have a Fujifilm X-T1, which is, in my view, not quite as nice for general handling, but I prefer the image quality from it. So if I'm doing a kind of landscape, long exposure oriented trip, or one where I know there's going to be a lot of that, I may stick with the Fujifilm. But if I know I'm going to be doing more general stuff and a lot of portrait things, I really love the handling of the M1, and I love the built-in stabilization. And I'll show you my bag later on if we've got time. Hopefully we will. But generally speaking, I get to take one of these bodies plus about 3 or 4 or even 5 spare lenses in a very small space, which I love a great deal. I also generally take a compact camera, normally something like a Sony RX100 series or a Canon G7X, something like that, whatever I'm testing at the time. And I also take my phone. That's the third camera I take. Just recently upgraded to a Samsung Galaxy S7. I've been a Galaxy S man for quite a few generations now. And I do post a lot of images from the phone, either with the phone's own camera or I transfer the pictures to the phone and post from there as I go along. And I'd like to also talk a bit more about that later on. How about you? What do you take?
Yeah, it's interesting because I just noticed two things. One, you have two different formats there. One is micro four thirds, one's APS-C, but in particular, they can't share any lenses. So as opposed to somebody who might take two Nikon bodies or two Fuji or two Olympus bodies, you're sort of committed to a set of lenses for one and another set of lenses for the other. That's something that people might want to consider. What do I take now? I'm not generally shooting landscape. This is going to be an interesting thing because I'm doing virtually all street photography these days. So I tend to go to an extreme. My number one camera these days is a Leica Q. I don't want to scare anybody away by the relatively high price of this camera. It's essentially an overpriced Fuji X100T. And so I think the equivalent for sane people would be a Fuji X100T. That's a 28 millimeter, in this case, f1.7 non-interchangeable lens. That's important to me. The other camera I take, I refer to as my 24-70 in a pocket. We've talked about this before. This is an RX100 Mark IV in this case. The Mark III is just as good. But this is the equivalent of a 24-70 on a full frame camera. So this serves two purposes. One is I keep it in my pants pocket. It doesn't require a coat pocket. It means that I've always got a good camera with me. And if I need something that's slightly longer focal length, I've got the 70 millimeter. So this is with me all the time, even when I go out to dinner and I don't take the Leica with me. I also take the phone, of course, an iPhone in my case, but one other camera I take, I've got a desk full of gadgets here today. When I go to places like Cuba or Africa, I will take this camera, which is a Fuji Instax, and this is sort of a Polaroid kind of thing. It gives me instant pictures, and the purpose of this is to take pictures for the people I encounter. Particularly people who may not have pictures of themselves or pictures of their children. And I find it to be a terrific icebreaker in terms of taking a picture of someone, giving them a print immediately, and then they're yours. You can photograph them. They'll do anything you want. So it's marvelous.
I should say, Doug, actually, what I've noticed on recent trips of mine is that, and that's a great tip, handing out those prints. What I've noticed on recently for trips for me is that I less and less use a compact camera as a backup camera, and I more and more, if I'm say want to travel light, I'm going out for the evening, I don't want to take all the lenses, I'll lock them up in a safe in the hotel or hide them away, and take out the interchangeable lens camera with one smaller lens. On the Olympus, I really like the 17mm 1.8 or the Lumix Leica 25 1.4. On the Fujifilm, I love the XF35 f2, and I just put them on and leave them there, and it's quite nice to just have one lens with you. So they kind of are performing double duty for me now. If I'm putting in the effort to actually take a bigger camera with me, I do want to use it. Whereas I find sometimes if I take a smaller format, like a 1-inch format, I may be tempted to take that more often. And invariably, I never regret taking out the bigger one, especially as I normally always, while staggering home after some exotic Belgian beers or something, I normally see this nice sort of canal view with a nice long exposure. And I think I can do it because I've got the gear with me to do it.
Yeah, I have become passionate about being able to go out occasionally with nothing in my hands, nothing over my shoulder. So there are times when I want to have virtually no visible camera at all. So that's where the RX100 comes in. And it takes remarkably good pictures. It's not the same as what I get with a larger format camera, to be sure, but it's incredibly versatile, even at night. So I've been very happy with that. What's interesting is that in my case, because I have two cameras, both with non-interchangeable lenses, I never have to worry about cleaning a sensor or getting a sensor dirty. And we'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about bags. So, I've got, even when I travel light, I've got a bunch of stuff. What do you carry when you travel? What bag do you use?
Okay, well, a bag is something that I've been trying to find the perfect bag for decades, and you'll find one that comes close but doesn't quite do everything. Now, when I lived in New Zealand, I noticed that all of the kind of adventurous mountaineer type photographers and the people who were taking pictures of skiers and snowboarders, they were all using f-stop bags, and that kind of piqued my interest in them. And then I spent a lot of time in America, and I noticed a lot of street and landscape photographers also using f-stop bags. And then when I came back to Europe, and I was hanging out with lots of people who were doing long exposure photography, they also had f-stop bags. So there was this message coming through to me, which was to buy an f-stop bag. So I've got two. Now, if you're not familiar with f-stop bags, their philosophy is not to have a backpack with built-in compartments for putting your gear in. They separate the two. So you start off with something called an ICU, or an internal camera unit. I have two. Here's one of them. This is quite a thin one, but I can get, if I get the Fujifilm X-T1 here, that can slot in the corner like so, and you can see I can get many more lenses in there. But you see the profile, this is pretty small. And the idea is that you pack one of these ICUs with your gear and then slot that into the backpack. The beauty of this system is that you can then mix and match the size of the ICU and the size of the backpack, depending on how much camera gear and how much other gear you want to carry. My bigger ICU, which I use for most of my trips, is this one. This is I think a small Pro. This occupies the entire bottom of my backpack, but it's still pretty compact, and you can see all my filters in here, which I'll talk about later. And here I can get all of the cameras and lenses that I need for a whole trip, plus filters, all in this one area. And if necessary, I can zip it up, and I've got this little box. If an airline is being a little bit snooty and they don't want me to take my whole backpack onto the plane, and I don't want to check in my camera gear, I just pull out this unit, and that will definitely fit under any airline seat. In terms of the actual backpack itself, the frame, I've got a Guru, which is one of their smaller backpacks, and I also have a Loka, which is a bigger one. I can fit my tripod in there if I turn the ICU on its side, which is great. I use the Loka if I'm away for a weekend and I want to pack some clothes in there. But if I'm doing a bigger driving trip, say around the continental Europe, which I do quite a lot in the school holidays, I'll use my Guru for the camera gear and the computer, and then I have the clothes in another pack. The only area where the f-stop bags let me down personally is that there's just kind of like a modest pocket, really, for a laptop. And I do always have a laptop in there, and I feel that it's not quite as well protected as it could be. So I use I don't have my flexible display on this laptop. This is a rather crumpled crumpler sleeve that gives it a bit of extra padding. But I wish there was a little bit more padding for the laptops in the f-stop bags. But otherwise, I'm very, very happy with them. So that's what I use.
Well, very good. I've been through sort of everything. I think I'm like a lot of people, which is for every significant trip, I used to buy a brand new bag because I never found the perfect bag. And I've been through backpacks, many of them. I've been through rollerboard bags. I've been through everything. But again, as I've downsized from big Nikons and big lenses and big tripods, I've gone to smaller and smaller bags. And remarkably, I have gone to a bag which I have now used for 2 years, more than 2 years, almost 3 years. And that is this Billingham, which I think is English, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. It's a very classy bag, actually, Doug. I know I have a lot of friends who have Leicas who also have that bag. There's some connection with Leica.
Yeah, don't go there. I do not own a Rolex watch. I want you to know that. But this is the Billingham Hadley Pro, Hadley Pro. And when I go travel now, this is not only my camera. This is an over-the-shoulder bag. It may look big on the video because I'm holding it so close to the screen. But not only is this my camera bag, this is my complete carry-on bag on the airline, the whole thing. I'll link to a blog post I did of a trip to Turkey a number of years ago in which I had everything. I had cameras. I had a laptop, which was my MacBook Air. I had an iPad. I had a big-ass set of headphones, which I no longer use. I now, by the way, travel with these little guys. And this fits absolutely everything that I need to carry. And it's sort of that's sort of my rule. If I can't get it into this bag, then it either has to stay at home or go in my check bag. And if it's going in my check bag, by definition, it can't be something particularly valuable. This one, I wouldn't get this color again. This green looks like I'm walking around as an LL Bean commercial, which is I don't know if you know LL Bean, but it's an American mail order company, primarily mail order, and everything looks sort of green and tan. But they make it in a number of colors, and I love this bag very much. So I go the other extreme. I want everything, including carry-on, in one little bag, nothing on my back, and as much as anything, I'm happy to leave most of this in the room and take out that little RX-100 with me when I go out to shoot. So that's it for bags. I think we've covered that pretty well. You're a tripod
What about
guy.
stands? Yeah, tripods.
Yeah, you're a guy who goes out. You do some nice long exposures. What do you do in the way of tripods these days?
Well, amazingly, a great deal of my long exposures are using this tripod. My hat, my beanie hat. I just put it on I find a shelf or a wall, and I'll just balance the camera on top of the hat, and you just fold it over if you want to angle it down, or bunch up this bit at the front if you want to angle it up, and it's surprisingly effective. And I always mention when I post pictures on Instagram and Facebook and so on whether I've used the beanie hat as a stand, but I do it quite a lot. So there's no shame in using whatever you have on you as a stand, but I do, of course, have some more serious gear. Now, for a long time, I used Manfrotto tripods, and I'm a big fan of them. I've got a large 055 CX Pro carbon fiber. It's massive, absolutely massive. I got this case for it that makes me look like Robin of Sherwood, like you're about to pull some arrows out, or Legolas from Lord of the Rings. But I thought, this is no good. I need something smaller. So about 6 years ago, I splurged and I spent a lot of money on a Gitzo Traveler. This is it. I'm going to peek through it. Now you can just about see my eyes. This is one of the original Gitzo Traveler tripods, and the thing that made it different, which now is available on a great many tripods, is the fact that the legs, which are normally like this, can actually fold back and over the head. And if you've got the right kind of head, at the time Gitzo didn't amazingly do a matching head for this, so I got one from a company called Markins, which I'm very, very happy with. You can see that it actually occupies a very small space. This tripod in length is now small enough to fit vertically inside my F-Stop Guru backpack, which is a small backpack. It's not a big one by any means. And that is fantastic. It's very light. It's carbon fiber. The thing that's most amazing about this to me is how sturdy it is. It is one of the sturdiest tripods I've owned, regardless of size. I've had, when I first used this, it was for a trip to Brooks Falls in Alaska, and I wanted to travel light, but equally, I was shooting the bears with a Canon 7D and a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. That's not an insignificant combination, and yet I had it on this tripod, on this little head here, and because it's built to such a high standard, it held it incredibly steadily, even for video. I was filming very still video. I've got an article about that, an old one, but one you may still find interesting at Camera Labs about my experiences at Brook Falls with this gear. So I'm very, very happy with this tripod. But there's another one I want to show you that I bought very, very recently. Now, I'm a huge fan of tabletop tripods because, again, the hat is okay, but it can only take you so far. Where I find the hat really limiting is obviously when my head's really cold and I don't want to take it off, but also when I want to shoot in the portrait orientation. You see, my hat solution is great when you're shooting in landscape. When you're shooting in portrait, you've got this big gap underneath, and you can try and fold it up. I've winged it a few times, but it's not ideal. So when I'm shooting, I want something to shoot in the portrait orientation that's very, very small. So I came up with this. And when I say I actually described this to one of my friends at B&H in New York, and he came up with the solution. So I should give them the credit. So here are the legs. These tiny little tabletop legs. This is a little carbon fiber tabletop tripod by a company called Fisol. This costs about $50. Like I say, I got this from B&H. It is very, very sturdy, very nice. What I also really like about this is that I can extend the legs like this, so that it is virtually flat to the floor. I mean, completely flat. But you can just angle one of the legs a little bit if you want to point the camera up and down, and you can mount it straight on here, and I've done that many, many times. You can, of course, mount a ball head on there, and I've done that when I'm shooting panoramas. But how are you going to mount? Let me grab my Fujifilm. How am I going to mount this camera in the portrait aspect on this little stand? Now, I've got my L bracket mounted on here, which is a very useful way to mount one of these cameras vertically. But how am I going to get that on that? Well, of course, these L brackets mate two plates, right, which you normally have on top of a ball head, but there's no reason why you can't just have the plate by itself. So that's what I bought. I bought a plate just by itself. This is a Sunway photo, again about $40 or $50, and I screw that directly onto this little tabletop tripod, and then the camera mounts straight on top of it like that. And that gives me an incredibly small, light, high quality and sturdy, means by which I can do long exposures very casually in the portrait orientation or the landscape orientation. And I keep this little tripod and this plate in my bag at all times. They are so small and light. And I've done, most recently, I have posted quite a few long exposures recently, which were taken with this very combination. And I absolutely love it. So I'm very, very pleased with this little tabletop tripod.
Well, this is fascinating because you and I did not discuss ahead of time what either of us was going to bring to the show. But I started, I have a big ass, really right stuff tripod, the big carbon fiber, extra long legs. Even carbon fiber weighs a ton, especially with the big BH55 ball head. And that's been sitting in the trunk of my car for 2 years and I haven't touched it. I just don't use that big tripod anymore. But I too have a Gitzo Traveler, and I think that is a marvelous tripod. If I need a real tripod, that goes with me. It is spectacular, it's light, it's strong, just like you said. And another feature is that it will fit inside a carry-on piece of luggage. So if you have a standard carry-on piece of luggage, I have a slightly different model. I have to actually pop off the head in order to get it into the bag, but that's fine. I just unscrew the head and put it in there. But being able to put the tripod in my checked luggage and not having to carry it with me is a great feature. And when it comes to what I actually take with me now, because I do not travel with a tripod even that size, I too take a little desktop model. This is the Really Right Stuff guy. So it's the equivalent of what you've got. A little tiny thing, and it opens up like this, and it sits down low, and I love it. And it has a little $19 head on it made by, I don't know how you pronounce these guys, Giottos, Giottos, I don't know.
Giottos, I think.
Giottos, okay. And it's great. I mean, I'm not going to put onto this a big, a D5 with a 200 to 400 millimeter lens, but I don't have a D5 with a 200 to 400 millimeter lens, so that's not a problem. You mentioned L brackets. And of course, as soon as I buy a new camera, the first thing I do is go out and buy L brackets. I tend to use Really Right Stuff brackets. I like them. I think it looked like yours was a Really Right Stuff bracket also. Is that true?
Mine's actually, I don't buy anything from Really Right Stuff for various reasons. This L bracket is actually from a UK company called Photomad. But I've also I've tried L brackets that are very expensive, and I've tried some that are very cheap. And I haven't had any bad experiences so far. But the thing I really love about them, I mean, this has really transformed the way that I do my photography, most of which is in the portrait orientation. Because normally, of course, if you have a ball head, I'll show you on my ball head here. Here it is like that, if the camera's mounted to that. And normally, if you're going into portrait aspect, you'd have it like that. And the camera's hanging off the side, and it's pretty obvious to see that that is not a stable configuration. It's not over the center of gravity, and it will begin to do this. It's not an ideal situation. But when you've got an L bracket, you can keep the head pointing up and you mount it like that, as you can see, and it just holds it vertically. And it really, I can't believe I lived for so long without an L bracket. I've only been using them for about 3 years now, but I wish I'd done it a lot sooner. And what I was trying to get across earlier with this other plate is that the beautiful thing about tripods is that you can mix and match all of this stuff because they all use standard threads, typically of 2 sizes. You can choose your legs, you can choose the head, and you can choose the plate all separately, and you mix and match until you get exactly what you want. And that's what I really love about tripods.
Yeah. Now, I went through that same thing. Again, as I said, I do buy L brackets for most of the cameras. I have plates for my tripods and my heads. But again, when I travel, I want to travel light. And once you start adding L brackets and plates, you're increasing the number of pieces and you're increasing the weight. So I've actually gone retro. I've gone back to using just the threads and the threaded heads on my tripods. Again, because I don't use them often. Now when I'm shooting in a studio or I'm doing a serious landscape shoot, which thankfully I don't do too often any longer, I'm out in the field with a big ass tripod, as I said, L brackets, plates, clamps, all those things. But I've actually gone the other extreme and gone back to simple. Now, I don't have a good solution, therefore, as you said, for shooting in the portrait mode. L brackets are brilliant for that, but that's where I'm stuck. Okay. We talked briefly about lenses, the fact that I don't take a camera with an interchangeable lens, which means I don't have to take anything out there for cleaning my sensor. My lenses themselves do get dirty. They do get wet. What do you do for both cleaning lenses, and do you clean your sensors in the field?
What I use, first of all, is vigilance, where I try my hardest not to get the things dirty in the first place. And one of the things I do is always use the lens hood. If you've got a lens hood, use it and put it the right way around. A lot of people get wound up by different aspects of photography. I try not to get wound up when I see other people doing things, because for me, if someone's taking a picture, even with their iPad, I don't care. They're taking pictures. They're sharing our hobby. I love that they're doing that. The more people take pictures, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But if you do want to annoy me, keep your lens hood on in its travel configuration all the time, because it's not going to do anything. It's not going to protect your lens. It's not going to protect it from flare. But it is amazing how a lens hood can actually protect the camera, not just from flare, but from dust and dirt and all manner of other things and people knocking into it. So I find, as I say, using the equipment that you've got is your first solution. But, of course, things do get dirty. And when you are changing lenses in the field, dust is an issue on the sensor. A long time ago, I did experiment with actual cleaning pads and some sort of like advanced-looking cotton wool or Q-tip type things, but that never really worked well for me. What I find now is, best of all, is one of these. This is also from that company, Giotto's. This is a rocket blower. I like it because it looks like a Tintin spaceship. And this is quite a large one. It's actually it's bigger than my camera, so maybe I should get one of the smaller ones, because this is actually one of the largest things in my backpack now when I travel. But it is a very, very good blower, and literally just a couple of scooshes. And remember to hold your camera down so gravity's on your side. Take off the lens, scoosh, scoosh like that, and you're done. There's been a few trips where I've gone, you know what? I'm not going to take the rocket blower with me this time. I don't need it. And you know what? Every time I do that, it bites me on the bum, and I think, why didn't I take it with me? Because it is invaluable. I'll always get dust on the picture. I did read about a photographer on Facebook who kept getting pulled over by airport security until one day one of them said, you know why we keep doing this, don't you? And he said, no, I don't. He says, because of this. And he had one of these because it does look like it could be some sort of offensive weapon or a little rocket. But you know what? I've taken this with hand luggage only to trips all over the world, including to and from the United States and in and out of Europe, where the security is very tight. And no one's ever given me any trouble over one of these, or even asked what it is. So maybe they didn't like the look of this person who was stopped. But this is invaluable. I never leave home without it. Although if I was buying a new one, I would get a smaller one. But they're cheap. They're like $10.
Yeah, I have the same. Here's mine. Same thing. Look at that. And
it is.
It does. It looks a bit like a hand grenade. So
yes.
But I did find this little guy. I can't remember the brand, but I'll try and track it down. But it's just as powerful. It's a little bit smaller. If I hold them up side to side, you can see slightly smaller. And it does the job, and it doesn't look quite as scary. But I always take a blower with me. In particular, I was in Iceland with Martin Bailey, and Martin, has a lot of experience shooting outdoors in the rain, which in Iceland, you're always in the rain, it seems like. He had a very important tip, which is how to clean your lens or your filter if it gets wet. And what Martin taught me was, do not wipe it. He said, if you wipe it, it's going to smear. He said, use your blower. Let your filter get wet, let your lens get wet, and then blow the water off the lens, take your picture. And it works marvelously. It's a spectacular tip. So I encourage everybody to take a blower of some sort or another and to consider using the blower to remove water drops before you get that perfect shot instead of a towel. Of course, I always travel with a microfiber towel. I would never go anywhere without a microfiber towel.
Yeah, me too. But I do try and minimize the contact with the lens, with any bits of glass, any elements. You do try and want to minimize your contact with them.
Right. Now, when I do travel on a long trip, go somewhere dusty, dirty, if I have an interchangeable lens camera, I do carry a sensor cleaning kit. A lot of people are afraid of cleaning their sensors. There's really no need. They're not as delicate as you might think. Of course, someone's now going to clean their sensor, scratch it, and blame me. But I've put together my own personal little kit of sensor cleaning stuff. I use sensor cleaning swabs. I use a little fluid called Eclipse. Although somebody just published something that Eclipse is dangerous for some of the new Sony sensors, so the company who makes Eclipse has come out with a new version. You might want to check that out. And another thing that I take with me, now this goes all against the idea of traveling light, but I love this thing. This is a light that comes on, if you can see that. Hard to tell, but it has little LEDs in it. This fits right in the lens mount, and it's a magnifier. And it allows me to see a sensor up close, which is just spectacular. And I don't take it in the big case. I just put this in a little baggie or something and carry that with me. So I am a fan of cleaning the sensor. If I'm shooting landscape stuff where I'm changing lenses, I will clean my sensor every night in between shoots.
I should also say that when you showed the light there, it reminded me that an actual headlamp is an essential accessory, especially if you're doing long exposure stuff at dusk, because you'll start off your shoot at daytime, at sunset, when everything's really bright, and you'll get so involved in the shoot that by the time you stop and you want to pack away, it's pitch dark. And you could be, on a rocky outcrop or by the sea, and one false move, you could slip and fall and really hurt yourself. So a light, as indeed Doug is demonstrating, and I have one of those, I have two of those, is an essential accessory. I never, ever, ever leave home without it.
That's right. This is good for two things. One is for, three. One is for cycling. Two is for shooting in the evening. The third is for taking out the garbage in the middle of the night. So I use it for all those. What a marvelous fashion accessory that is. Mm-hmm. Here's a question I want to ask you. It comes up fairly often. Do you put a filter over your lens for the purpose of protection? This is a controversial topic.
Never.
And what's your logic behind that?
Because you're introducing another glass to air surface on either side. And every one of those that you have in your optical path is going to potentially degrade it. Now, you could spend a lot of money on a lens and a camera and to get the best quality, and then you'd put a filter on that could not be of the same standard and end up compromising your image quality. So you've got to actually ask yourself, why are you using this filter in the first place? If it's for protection, I would go back to what I mentioned earlier. If it's protection against knocks and scratches and things like that, I just use the lens hood. And I find that they're very, very effective. And I've just been using lens hoods alone I've not put on, say, a UV or a skylight filter for protection for about 15 years. Yeah. And I've not had a scratch in that time. Now, there are a couple of occasions when it's, say, chucking it down with the rain, or let's say you're at the edge of a muddy rally type course and cars or mountain bikes are going to be coming past and spraying you with mud literally on every pass, or maybe horses or something. In that scenario, when you absolutely know you're going to get sprayed with mud or water, that is the only time I would do it. Otherwise, no, because I don't want to compromise. I've spent this money on the optics. I want them to perform at their best, and I have seen some compromises with filters. It's not to say there aren't good filters. There are lots of them. I just don't have any of them.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple of extremes that I use. One, of course, the little RX100, not only doesn't it take a filter, it doesn't have a lens cap because it has an electronic or electric lens cap on it, so that covers me on that one. I went through the same experience that you did, Gordon. I started... in the early days, I used to buy filters because everybody said, buy a UV filter to protect your lens. But of course, over the years, lenses have become so good. And in particular, not only is it the air to glass interface, but the coatings on lenses are phenomenal. And the challenge was, can you really even get a filter that has a coating that's as good as your good lenses? And that's hard. The only change so I don't use them, but I also don't use lens caps. What I find is if I'm changing cameras, the lens cap comes off at the beginning of the day, and all the lens caps, they end up in the bottom of the bag until I get back to the hotel. So I said, why not just leave the lens caps at home? Now, I always, with the Q, for example, I always use the hood. The hood in this case is marvelous because you can't get this thing off. You almost need a wrench to get this hood off. So it's particularly good. What I do is I drop this into the bag, no lens cap at all. The lens hood in this case is long enough and strong enough that it's a decent protection. However, this is the one case where I have gone and put a filter on. You can see a little bit of the glare here. part of it is because it's a non-interchangeable lens camera. And that means if I damage the lens, I've damaged the camera. I have no choice but to send the whole camera back to Leica for repairs. And I did find an extremely good filter. This is a B+W Clear MRC Nano. It's not a UV filter. It's literally just a clear filter, but it has the MRC Nano coating. And I believe that this coating is as good as the lens on the Leica. So this is an exception.
And how much was that filter, Doug?
This filter, it's a 49 millimeters, so it came in at about $50 or $60. Wasn't
That's not too bad.
Wasn't too bad.
Can I show you some filters that I do use?
Yeah, let's talk about filters. What filters do you use, Gordon?
Well, we've just obviously discussed that I don't use skylights or UVs, but because I am into long exposure photography, I do use neutral density filters. And in the neutral density world, it's really a toss-up between Format High-Tech and Lee, which I'm gratified to say are both companies in the United Kingdom. I went with Lee, but Format High-Tech is also very good. I have got one of their big stoppers, which is a 10-stop ND filter. I've gone for their 7.5 system. These are quite small filters, but they've got enough coverage for the formats that I use. There's no need for me to carry 100 millimeter filters. So this is the big stopper, 10-stop ND, which is very nice. This is great for daytime long exposure photography. And then when it begins to get a little bit darker, and I don't need so much absorption, I've got a 3-stop. And I've also got a hard grad. This is where it's dark on one end and light on another. And the idea is that you put this in and you kind of shuffle it down to the horizon on, say, a seascape. So you can darken the clouds but not the sea, or vice versa. You can turn it that way around. And that's one of the other reasons why I've gone for square filters as opposed to circular ones that screw on the front. With the square filters, you can adjust them. Sometimes this line on a hard grad is quite easy to see on your picture. It's a bit of a giveaway. So what you can do is sometimes just angle it a little bit to follow maybe some rocks that are, across the horizon, at a slightly different angle, and that makes it a bit more discreet. But that's where I've gone. So the filters that I do use are neutral density filters, and this is a really nice system.
Yeah, I think we've both been through the whole thing. I started with screw-on filters, and the problem, of course, with screw-on filters is, let's say you have a neutral density filter and you put on a 6-stop filter, for example. Now you can't really focus. You can't see well. So you have to take the filter off, unscrew it, do your composition, do your exposure, calculate the difference, screw the thing back on. At that point, you've probably moved the camera. So, like you, when I'm out doing landscape, I use these flat filters. I happen to have a Lee holder. I've switched to the high-tech format filters in particular, except for the big stopper. I use the Lee big stopper. I like it very much. I've broken 2 of them because they're glass. They're very delicate. They're very hard to get sometimes, and it's annoying to break those things because you feel really stupid. But I like the rectangular filters because I was using Nikon at the time. I have the 100 millimeter large ones. Today, of course, since I don't even own a Nikon camera anymore, I'd probably use the small ones as well. But like you say, Lee or high-tech format, those are both probably my favorites.
And I also this is what I use to time my long exposures. This is a trigger trap cable. This is, again, something that I take with me absolutely everywhere with the filters. I've got a USB, as you can see, it's got a variety. You can choose how to mix and match the cables. So this end goes into your phone, and it actually uses a sound to trigger the exposure, and then you just plug in here whatever is the matching cable for your particular camera. I use a USB port here, which works on all the Fujifilm cameras. So you're actually using your phone as the timer, and this, because a phone is obviously a very sophisticated device, it allows the Trigger Trap app to do all sorts of things. It could be an intervalometer, an interval timers to take pictures at certain things. I use it very, very basically just to say I just want a 4-minute exposure or a 2-minute exposure. And it works really, really well. The only downside to it is that you're using a potentially quite expensive piece of gear, your phone, as your, as literally an on-off switch for your shutter. And again, when it gets dark, you could be a little bit worried that maybe your phone could get damaged. But I know some people who've got little grips for their phones that they mount on their tripods, or sometimes this cable's long enough that I can actually just balance the phone in my pocket during a long exposure. So the Trigger Trap cable, that's what I use for all my long exposure work.
Yeah, I have that also. The one downside, as I recall, is that if you're doing really long exposures like star trails, you don't I'm not sure you want to be using your phone for 4 hours for a 4-hour shot, for example. Your battery's going to run down. I don't remember with the trigger trap whether it had trouble staying on or not, but there are issues like that. So it doesn't solve everything, but for the normal long exposure work, I agree with you. Trigger Trap makes a great product there. I think the app is free and you pay for the cables, as I remember.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you take in the way of straps, Gordon? What are your favorite camera straps these days?
Well, Doug, there is of course only one camera strap that I would take away with me, and that's the official Camera Labs camera strap.
I still don't have one, you know.
Really? Well, we'll try and resolve that. Only 100 were made.
Okay.
And 100 were sold. So that's it. I am thinking of making some more. If anyone's interested in an official Camera Lab strap, I could get another run done. A run done? That sounds like some sort of ethnic meal. I'll have the run done, please, with rice. It's just a basic over the shoulder strap where they kind of hang off the side. And the nice thing about straps like this, not just the official Camera Lab strap, but any strap like this, is that the camera kind of hangs down on the side. And you can do this quite discreetly if you have a coat, because you can kind of hang it inside the coat or inside the coat pocket like that. So that when I was talking earlier about going out with just one body and one lens, I can do that and support it with this strap and still be quite discreet, as long as I've got a massive coat. So the Camera Lab strap, that's what I use. More often than not, though, I don't use a strap.
Yeah,
but I do take a bag. How about you?
Well, I've gone through, just like bags, I've gone through every possible strap. I tend to go out with a wrist strap. The one I'm using now, I'm using a system from Peak Design. But I like this because I just walk around with this little thing hanging on my wrist, and it's very comfortable, even with a camera as heavy as the Leica Q. With something like the RX100, of course, it's got its own teeny little tether strap. But if I'm taking two bodies, I'll also use the Peak Design system, and I have a big over-the-shoulder strap. But Peak Design uses these little pieces that you attach. So I can either take, here's like a Sony, this is a Sony, what is this? An A7R. I can attach a wrist strap to this little tab, or I can use two tabs, one on each side, and attach the over-the-shoulder strap. And the straps from Peak Design, they're strong and they're comfortable. And I like them very much. So that's my current strap system. That I haven't changed in at least 6 months. Okay, I know where we're going with this one. You're on the road, you're traveling. One of the things you have to do is carry batteries, and you're going to have to recharge those batteries. What is the Gordon Laing solution for batteries and charging on the road?
Well, I'm trying to run a campaign to make everything USB chargeable, because I'm fed up with carrying chargers around with me, little proprietary AC chargers. When I left New Zealand and kind of went on the road for a couple of years, not intentionally for a couple of years, just worked out like that, such a large portion of my bag was occupied with chargers, literally everywhere. And it's not just for your cameras, it's for your computer, it's for your tablets, it's for, if you use an electric toothbrush or a razor or, hair clippers. They've all got different chargers, and it was driving me mad. And I'm very pleased to see that over the years, USB charging has become more and more prevalent. I know some people are very resistant to it, but if you do a lot of travel, you'd be mad not to like it. So for the times when I have USB chargeable devices, I carry a giant USB battery with me. That's the size of the ones that they put in the bottom of those Tesla cars. No, it's not quite. It's not that big. It's about the size of. I've got two. Actually, I've got one that's like a kind of lipstick sized, because I obviously do quite a lot of that. And I've got one that's more kind of like a wallet sized. And the lipstick sized one, they're both from Anker. That has got enough charge in it to fully recharge my phone, or something like an RX100, which is USB chargeable. And the bigger one can do that like 4 times over. They are very, very useful. But, when I'm shooting with the Olympus and the Fujifilm, they are both requiring separate proprietary AC adapters. So whenever I take those chargers out, I think, you know what, maybe I should switch to Sony, because they're all USB chargeable now, and I know they're little batteries. But so the rule with those cameras is to carry spares, because you don't always have access to AC outlets. So I have to carry spares for both of them.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. You have explained to me, and I have learned the benefits of USB charging. I love it when I have it. My Leica Q doesn't support that, so I have to take the charger for that and a couple of spare batteries. And a Leica battery costs as much as some cameras, so I tend to use Panasonic batteries instead, which ironically are identical. I do. We all carry little USB power supplies. This company, which I think is the Amazon house brand, Anker. It's Anker. It seems like
that's what I use for my batteries. I didn't know that was an Amazon brand. Is that true?
Well, I don't know, but it seems to be there's a close affiliation. Let's say that. But you can get this. I think you had a 2-port model. I happen to have a 4-port model. They're actually about the same size, but they're very good. There's been a lot of discussion online about not using cheap USB supplies because you can accidentally get high voltage applied to some of the terminals if something goes wrong, which would be a very bad thing.
Now, you mentioned backup there. In terms of moving on to kind of image backup, what I do is I go, so my kind of workflow, as you know, and as if you follow me on the social accounts where I post my own photography, I'm very much into posting out of camera JPEGs. I'm not doing any post on my computer because A, I'm not interested in it, and B, I'm no good at it. So I like to do it straight out of camera because I can get the effect that I want all in camera. What this means is that I can actually review my images as I go along. So I'll be at a location, I'll take a picture, and I'll chimp it afterwards. I'll look at it on the screen, and I'll think, you know what? I think that's good to go. I'll transfer it to my phone, which has a bigger screen, and I can zoom in and look at it in more detail, make sure it's in focus and it's okay. Then I post it, and it's gone. Now, there's several advantages to this. First is that there's nothing like coming home after a long trip and thinking, oh, I've got so much spare time, I can go through all those pictures that I took. Because, of course, you haven't got any spare time. You've got to catch up with work, stuff to do with all your domestic stuff around the house, everything. And you end up not looking at those pictures for about another 3 years. The beauty of doing them as you go through the trip is that you're actually looking and using your images. You're also posting them so people can see what you're doing. And if your photographic strategy involves posting a lot of pictures, then that fuels that run. But the other thing it's doing is backing them up. Now, when you post them to some networks, obviously they reduce the quality or resize it. But the point is that there is now a version of this on the internet that is protected should the worst case scenario happen and you lose all your gear. And this is something that I also do. Once it's in my phone, I save the original. I always transfer it at the original resolution, by the way. A lot of the phone apps with the Wi-Fi allow you to transfer a low resolution. I transfer the original image for a couple of reasons. First, I think feeding the networks the original image gives you better quality, even if they're throwing most of it away. At least they're starting with a high-resolution image to start with. And if you're posting on something like Ello, then they really can exploit those big images. But secondly, it means I can copy it into, say, a Dropbox folder on my phone, and it's already uploading it and protecting it, backing it up as I go along from location to location. And for me, that's the best way of doing things. I remember when we were talking about this episode, I remembered that a long time ago, the way I used to do it was to go into a cybercafe, as we used to do, to have access to the internet. And I would literally burn images onto a CD, a recordable CD, and post it using the slowest possible post. I didn't care how long it took, as long as it got there, and posted it back home. If I was on a long trip and I was in somewhere like, say, South America or in Africa, and I thought there was a real risk of me losing this gear or having it nicked or it breaking. And doing that is the same. The modern version is what I've just described, which is, uploading stuff to the cloud as you go along. And it's great. I'm backed up. So if a card gets corrupted, if the camera gets stolen or damaged, I know that all of my photos to that point are protected. And I've already reviewed which are my best ones. So for social posting. So that's my strategy. That's my backup strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting that, again, we have two different ways of doing this. Unlike you, I rarely post from the road. If I'm out, even if I'm in Cuba for a week or if I'm going to Europe for 3 weeks, I'll do very little. When I go to Cuba, I don't take a laptop at all. When I go to Europe, I'll take one just because I can't go 3 weeks without a laptop. But I will, first of all, make sure that I have enough SD cards to last the whole trip. I never reformat an SD card while I'm traveling. So that's my first level of backup. My first level of backup is don't delete the original. Second, I take a little Western Digital, what is it called? A My Passport Wireless. This happens to be a 1 or 2 terabyte model. And every night I'll take my SD cards from my 1 or 2 cameras and I'll just plug them in and I will back them up to this device. It is one of the world's most confusing devices that you can possibly have. The interface is poor, but once you figure it out, it's a really excellent device. It looks like you've got one there or something quite similar.
Yeah, this is quite similar. I've got many Western Digital passport drives. This is another 2.5-inch drive, so it can be powered by USB. What I do, in addition to that, if I copy the pictures onto my laptop, I'll duplicate them onto one of these portable hard disks. And here's the critical bit. It's not a backup, a proper backup, unless you've got it in 2 different places. So I will never keep this portable hard drive in the same place as my laptop or cameras. So I keep them in separate bags. If I'm traveling, say, with my family and we've got separate bags, I will spread the risk. So that if someone nicks my backpack while I'm out and about, or it gets lost or damaged, or in one very careless situation, again, when you get involved in doing these long exposure seascapes or whatever, you're not aware often of rising tides and waves suddenly splashing into your bag and ending up with a backpack full of seawater. That has happened to me before. If this drive was in there, then it could be goodbye to all my backups. But I always keep it in a different bag just in case something happens to the other one. So it's all about minimizing your risk. And that was my strategy about doing stuff to the cloud, is that it seems to be, whether it's Dropbox or whether it's social networking, getting it out there onto the internet at least means that it's no longer dependent on the gear that you have with you.
Yeah. Now, what's special about this device, this My Passport Wireless, if you can see the actual name on it there, is that this does not require a computer or other device. It has an SD card slot. So I literally just put the SD cards in it. I wait for as long as it takes to copy them, and I pop them out. Just like you, this goes in my check bag. All right, this goes into my check luggage, whereas my cameras and my SD cards stay in my carry-on. Well, we've done pretty well here, Gordon. We've covered a lot of stuff on the show. I think it's been pretty interesting, but I want to ask you one more question. Do you have some kind of favorite non-photographic goodie that a tip for our listeners and viewers, something you love to travel with that isn't specific to photography?
There is, Doug. I'm glad you asked me that. I'm particularly glad you asked me it before we started recording the show so I could show you it as well. Now, as anyone who knows me will tell you, I'm very, very much into coffee. And if you love coffee, there is nothing worse than a bad cup of coffee. And when you travel and you're in somewhere new, I love trying new cafes, but there's nothing more disappointing than getting a cup and you're like, oh man, that's rubbish. So to minimize disappointment on the road, make your own coffee. And for me, the best portable solution is this. This is the AeroPress, and if you're into coffee, I think you absolutely have to get one. Forget about those capsule machines. Forget about all that nonsense. This is the way forward. What you do is you put in a paper filter, goes in there, screw it to the bottom, put in your ground coffee, and I'll come to that in a minute. Pour in boiling water. I do it to the top because I like a long coffee drink. You put the plunger in. A vacuum holds the water there. This is now over a mug. And it's not dripping at this point because a vacuum is holding it. And after about 30 seconds, which is long enough not to over-extract, you push it down. You're providing like the pressure of an espresso machine there. And what you get out of there is fantastic coffee. However, to make it even better, hand grind your own beans. This is what I take with me. This is a Rhino grinder, but I also have one from Paulex. I've not got the handle with me, but you literally just put the beans in there, grind it by hand. It takes about 30 to 45 seconds. That's it. Less than 1 minute to grind 2 shots worth. And the really cool thing about these hand grinders is they're designed to sit inside the AeroPress. So this tiny item, and I'll do a little advert for my favorite coffee beans. These are from Horsham, which is just up the road from me. They now ship internationally. Fantastic beans. This is about the size of my camera, so it goes everywhere with me. If you can blag some boiling water off someone, you don't need to take a kettle. I take a little camp stove just in case. But here's the thing. I like this so much for travel. This is what we use at home. This is our coffee machine at home. We don't use anything electrical or anything more sophisticated. So the AeroPress provides our coffee at home and on the road. I love it. So that's my top tip when traveling.
This is why you travel with your family, because you have so many things you need a team of Sherpas to carry all this stuff.
You don't want this. This is tiny, Doug. That's it. That's it. That is the coffee machine and the grinder. This is small. I can get all of this in my backpack. And anyone who's been on a photo walk with me for like a weekend will know that I take this with me, and you end up being a barista for the weekend because you're making coffees for everyone.
There you go. Oh, goodness. Well, like I say, I if it doesn't fit in my carry-on bag, it doesn't go with me generally, except for this Western Digital My Passport. All right, I've got one tip. I don't know what the standards are in the UK. I haven't been to London for a while, but if you're an American and you travel around the world, you get a little frustrated that hotels don't have washcloths. They provide face towels, they provide bath towels, but there seems to be an aversion to the standard washcloth. How about the UK? Do you guys ever wash in the UK? Do you ever wash your face?
No, we don't wash in Europe.
There you go. That explains it. So I found these marvelous little things. This little thing in my hand here, if you get it wet, expands to a flimsy but full-size washcloth. And you can get a bag of them. I don't know how many in a bag. A bag of 50 from Bike Master, they're called. And when you travel, you even get a little tube. It comes with a tube, and you can put, I don't know, about 10 of these little washcloths in a tube.
How'd you get it back in?
You don't. Once it expands, you're done. It's good for one or two uses because it's so flimsy anyway. But you take a little tube full of them, right? But I find it a very useful personal hygiene accessory.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not really an issue for me.
Gordon, what a fascinating episode. I think welcome home from all your travels.
Thank you.
I'll be more or less flying over you. I'll wave on my way to Paris as I begin my descent over the UK. And when are you coming to San Francisco again?
Oh, as soon as possible, Doug.
Okay.
As soon as possible. In fact, one of the last times I was in San Francisco, I met you, and you brought your giant RSS tripod. I remember it, and I was very impressed with its size. That might have been the last time it came out of your trunk.
Probably. I didn't use it, I'm sure. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you in one place or another. It's been a great episode. Thank you very much, Gordon.
Tell us what tripods you use in the comments. Tell us what accessories you use, because you'll have gone throughout this whole thing. They never mentioned the X, X, Y, Z, and that is the most important thing I take when I'm traveling. So tell us what you think we should be traveling with, and what you travel with, and what's your most valuable piece of equipment. That's not a camera or a lens, but a bag or a tripod or some sort of stand or cleaner or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, as always, send us your comments. Tell us what you like, what you don't like about the show, what you'd like to see in the future. But in particular, as Gordon says, what's the favorite obscure thing that we forgot to mention? Gordon, thanks again, and thanks to everybody for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time on All About the Gear. Oh, by the way, check the show notes, because we'll have links to a lot of the things that we've discussed here on this show to help you find them online. As always, go to cameralabs.com, check out the latest reviews for every camera you've ever heard of. And again, once again, we'll see you next time on All About the Gear. Thanks a lot.